It taught me so much about how to build my life as I wanted to. And I think if Saturn return can give us anything, it's that. It's like, this is your life. You are going to die. That's what Saturn tells us. Like, you are not going to be here forever. You have a very short amount of time here. Look how fast your 20s went by. Look how they flew by. And it's gonna go even faster in your 30s. And if that is true, and make that true in your everyday consciousness, what do you want to do with this one precious life? This is yours to define and shape if you have the privilege to do so. And if you do, that privilege is a great responsibility that I think we have to take seriously.
You're listening to the Almost 30 podcast, hosted by Krista Williams and Lindsay Simsick. Almost 30 started as a conversation about the transition from our 20s to our 30s. But then we realized life is full of transitions. So we expanded our mission.
We are an intuition-led, wellness-focused lifestyle podcast that promises to deliver authentic conversations, diverse points of view, and insights rooted in optimism, growth, and intention. The Almost 30 Nation community is a group of purposeful dreamers who are smart, passionate, and always seeking the full potential in every aspect of their lives.
At Almost 30, we're making magic together. We dream it,
and then we do it.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Almost 30 podcast.
Here we go.
Welcome back to Almost 30 podcast. We're
everyone.
So glad you're here.
What's going on? It's Lindsay and Krista. We're so glad you're tuning in. Maybe it's your first time or your millionth time. We're just really grateful. We hope to have really honest, thoughtful, inspiring, hopefully funny conversations on here so that you feel less alone.
Yes. Welcome.
Excited for this one. I feel like it's been a long time coming.
Yes,
It's been
it has.
like a goal. I remember when you told me that Chani was coming on.
Chani's like, I've been following Chani for such a long time. I've done a bunch of her offerings online as it relates to my own sign, whether it's rising, moon, or sun sign. And I did one like a year ago. It was like
Tell
all
me it's
about
relationships.
Like, yeah, of course. It's romance.
I was
and
thinking,
it's sex.
I was thinking about that when I actually was scrolling her site. I was like, I wonder if Lindsay's done that.
It was literally something like the burning rose of like, you know, your heart's thorn or something. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm in. Oh, it's your sex. Oh, this is a workshop on your love, sex, and synastry. That's what I did.
Yes.
And look at me now. No, but she's been in the game for and I don't mean game. I just really mean this like world. She was like one of the first to talk about astrology and to really make it more mainstream, accessible. She has over 1 million people like that she's talking to, you know, through social media and her offerings. So I'm starstruck.
Yeah, she's a badass. Her name has been around forever. And meeting her was so cool. She came to the studio. She is such a just like badass. You know, she's so clear, direct, has been doing her thing. And she gave us such amazing advice after. So it was really fun to connect with her after about all of the things. But this episode's going to be awesome. We're going to talk a lot about her new book, You Were Born for This, which is Astrology for Radical Self-Acceptance. So this will be super helpful for you guys in understanding more about astrology and how to apply it to your life so that it's helpful.
Mm-hmm. She says if astrology does its job, it offers a mirror in which we see both our best selves and our growth edges, which I really, really love. So a lot of us just know astrology through, you know, Cosmo magazine, reading our, you know, little monthly blurb. But that is quite literally just such a small part.
I love the Cosmo ones because it's like, this week may be different at work. Buy the heels. Enjoy your weekend.
I know.
It's like so fucking stupid.
Totally. But she really gets into not only like your sun sign, moon, your ascendant. We talk about like the transits. We talk about it all. And her book goes into so much depth. So you can really dig into your whole chart and it's really easy to read. I need stuff like that to be easy to read. You know?
I have it actually right by my bed and it was really helpful for me to have my chart in front of me and then flip through her book into certain areas when I wanted to figure out those certain parts of my chart. Maybe it was like my sun, my moon, or my ascendant and apply it to what would be helpful for me at the time. And I also love that during this conversation, we actually got personal too. We talked about her marriage to her beautiful wife and sort of how that's impacted her, which was really beautiful and fun, and got to know her just a little bit better as a person. So for all you astrology fans, this is for you. For all you Chani fans, this is for you. For all you people of the world, we are hopeful this is just going to be helpful in understanding yourself better and how you interact with our lovely Earth.
Her book is available now. You Were Born for This. And you can go to ChaniNicholas.com to learn more about Chani, and other resources are there too. Again, I took that workshop and I'm feeling good, but she has so many on there. So explore. You can follow her on Instagram at Chani Nicholas. And a few announcements before we get into this episode. Upcoming, we have a few months out, our retreat in Malibu. That is happening at Calamigos Ranch, which is just heaven on earth. We're so proud of, the time that our team has put into this. And we're just being super thoughtful about the programming and the offerings and just creating an experience that women can truly relax, heal, and remember for a long time.
Yeah. So not only is it at, Calamigos, which is 5-star, the food is going to be mostly plant-based, amazing. We can adjust it to any of your dietary requirements. We have the biggest swag bags in the game full of all of our favorite products. We'll be able to be outside, we'll be in nature, and we're going to have sessions on things like astrology, on things like Reiki, on social justice, on finance and health and wellness. So it's going to just run the gamut like we do, and it'll be a fully holistic experience with other women that are just as down for transformation as you are.
Yeah. And then even sooner than that, we have a digital workshop coming up with Jenna Zoe, our human design guru.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So that is on February 29th from 11 to 2, and that is going to be digital. So that allows us to make it more accessible for more people within our community. And not only do you get the digital workshop with Jenna on Zoom, you get the chance to ask her questions. You get 2 workshops for her on her website, and those will be sent to you through a code. So you will have $78 worth of Jenna Zoe courses sent directly to you when you buy your ticket. And then you get the digital course opportunity to ask her a question and listen to her talk about all things human design.
Yeah. To learn more, you can go to almost30podcast.com, both the retreat and that digital workshop with Jenna. Really excited about that. Thank you for listening. We appreciate and love you. If you're called to write a review on Apple Podcasts, that means the world to us. We'll read one on the other side of this episode. And if this episode resonates with you and if you think it'll resonate with a friend or family member, just pass it along to them. We really appreciate it. We love you.
We love you. We'll see you soon.
Okay, fam, before we get into this episode, I wanted to tell you about a first-time offering. Krista and I are so excited. We are hosting, along with our friend Jenna Zoe, human design reader and expert, a digital Human Design for the Soul event. This is happening February 29th. It's a Saturday at 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. PST. This is happening online, so in the comfort of your own home. And we are going to help you integrate human design to find your soul's purpose. So Jenna Zoe, she's been on the podcast. She is our go-to for everything human design. So you got to get ready to connect on a level, like a soul level, with like-minded spirits as we dive super deep into what human design is and 4 various topics within the human design world. So purpose, relationships, health, and personal development. So this is a 3-hour event. There will be many breaks in between, but truly we want you to walk away knowing your human design on a deeper level than ever, being able to apply it to your life and feeling super empowered. So we'll have a welcome from 11 to 11:30, 11:30 to 12. We're going to talk about purpose. So like the ego center, what it can tell you about your motivation. Then we're going to go into relationships. So for example, how being the best partner you can be is simpler than we make it using our human design. 12:30 to 1, We're going to talk about health. So qualities in your chart that can tell you about your ideal eating style, for example, and so much more. 1 to 130. This is about personal development, overcoming the fears you're born with, eliminating anxiety, etc. And then we're going to do a Q&A with Jenna Zoe. And we're also going to include access to Jenna Zoe's Energy Type Masterclass, which is about a $40 value. So this is really, really exciting. This is the first time ever that we're doing this. So we're wanting to make it as accessible as possible. So you can go to almost30podcast.com and you can click on events and speaking. And under events and speaking, the first event, digital event with Jenna Zoe, Human Design for the Soul, is listed there. You can get your tickets and we cannot wait to connect with you. So again, almost30podcast.com for more information. This is going to be such a unique opportunity for our community. Cannot wait to connect with you. Love y'all. Enjoy this episode.
Ever since we had Kelly LeVeque on the podcast, I have been a Fab Four smoothie girl, and I found a protein that I love. It is plant-based, it is vegan, it is gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, all of those things. And what I actually love most about it is that Unico's protein comes with an enzyme complex, so it helps me digest immediately while taking it.
Yeah, it's so great. And you can use it as a meal replacement. So a lot of these proteins have like synthetic vitamins and fillers providing empty carbs. And Gemini is so delicious and has real organic foods along with the 3 different types of organic vegan proteins like sweet potato and organic spinach, coconut oil, steel cut oat. It's just delicious and super clean, and the branding is adorable. If you'd like a discount, of course, we have one for you. You can go to uniconutrition.com and use the code almost30 for 29% off plus 2-day shipping for free. So that's UNICO nutrition.com. Use the code almost30 for 29% off and free 2-day shipping.
Well, this has been a long time coming for the both of us. We've been a fan of yours, Chani, for a long time. And what's really cool is that astrology was one of the things that I think brought our community together too. Conversations around what some might feel is like woo-woo and out there really drew us to one another and was a safe space and a place where we could get to know one another and ourselves in a really fun way. And you were, at the top of those resources for our community. So they're so excited that we're talking.
Yeah, it's an honor. You're like you're an icon in this space, so. And you've got the icon jewels on her. You guys should see. Her jewel stack is like insane. Of course, it's heirloom. You can't buy it anywhere, whatever. But actually, so almost 30 started when Lindsay and I were in our Saturn return. I got out of my Saturn return surprisingly later than I thought, but that was really the impetus for starting almost 30 was really that period in time where I felt really lost. I felt all the effects of everything that was going on, and I didn't have a word for it. I didn't have an understanding of why it felt so chaotic for me in my late 20s and for Lindsay as well. And that's really why we started. So I would love to really start there, just as information for the people of our community, mostly are going into their Saturn return, are in, or maybe just transitioning out, talking a little bit about the Saturn return and what that brings up for people.
Yeah. I wish I had your charts, actually.
I know. So I was thinking about that too.
No. Yeah. Next time.
Jamie, get our charts.
First off, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, Saturn return, there's a couple of different ways that astrologers look at it. Some astrologers look at just the moments when Saturn is hitting the exact or transiting the exact same place that Saturn was in when you were born. I tend to look at it as a 2.5 to 3 year period, the time within which Saturn is transiting the entire sign or house that Saturn was in when you were born. And so it is there, and not all of those, not every day of that 2.5 year period is the same, or 2 year or 3, because Saturn will go in and out of a sign for a little bit. It'll like in March, it's going to come into Aquarius for the first time in like 29.5 years or whatever. And then it's going to leave, it's going to go back into Capricorn, and then it's going to fully go back in a little later in the year, well, in December. And so it has this, planets have this way of like peeking into signs for a little bit. And that'll be like that. I would count for those babies who have Saturn in Aquarius, who are about 27 at this point, 26, 27. They're and a little bit older, but they're going to start to feel the beginning effects of their Saturn return in March and for a couple of months. And then it'll recede and then it'll come back and then it will be there for a good 2+ years. And so there's this time frame between 27 and 30. And sometimes people have Saturn in a place where during their Saturn return, Saturn will roll over it back and forth 3 times because it'll be part of Saturn's retrograde. And so some people get really hammered with the Saturn return, and some people just have it once. That sometimes Saturn will just go over the point that it was at when you were born, and it'll be that one time. And also, if you have planets in the sign that Saturn, like conjunct Saturn or around that, or if you have planets opposed in the opposite sign or in a sign that squares it, or if you're ascendant or midheaven, like there's all these other things in your personal chart that can get tangled up in the Saturn return. And all that being said, Saturn return is a time of defining yourself for yourself. It is the beginning of that process in a more mature way than you've ever done it before. Saturn has, we call them like the full Saturn cycle is 29.5 years. That's it, getting back to the point it was at when you were born. But every 7 years, it makes an aspect to itself. So at 0, we're born, Saturn is in the place that it's in. At 7 years old, we have our first Saturn square. And that's a time of like some kind of tough corner that will turn in terms of our growth and maturity and psychological development. And then at 14, we have our first Saturn opposition. And we all know what 14 is like. It's a tough time. It's a tough corner. And that's the Saturn opposition is like, oh my God, who am I? I feel so small or insignificant, but I'm also struggling to try to become like some sort of older person. I don't know what that means. And we're awkward and we're up against a lot of authority issues. It's that Saturn opposition. Saturn represents authority and structure and definition and makes things real. And so 14 is that time where we're kind of like torn apart a little bit. And then the Saturn last quarter square happens at 21, where in the United States, we call that becoming an adult. And that's when you get to go drink and do all the things. But it's also when you're like, I'm not a teenager anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, what does being a 20-something mean? And that's that's like a crisis point of like, what do I take from my childhood? What does it mean to be an adult? What do I bring in? And then at 27-ish, we start the process of that Saturn return. And that is the time where we're like, okay, I've done a full circle in terms of my evolution, in terms of my progress. Now I'm no longer going to be 20 for I'm finishing up my 20s and what I got away with at 21 is not what I can get away with at 31, I'm pretty sure. And Saturn is a planet of age and maturity and finality. There's a feeling of closing out an era of our life. And what did I start out at? What did I start my 20s with? And what did I do with them? And if I didn't do much with them, the Saturn return, or if I didn't, we all do a lot in our 20s, but if I didn't really apply myself in a way that made me feel like I had some sort of self-respect or that I was living out something with integrity or developing myself in some way that required a lot of rigorous effort, Saturn return will come along and really be like just staring at you. Yeah. Like it's a relentless planet. It makes things very real. And so it brings us into form. And for some of us, that feels really great. And for some of us, that feels really challenging. And all that to say, I'm sure you talk about this ad nauseum, but the 20s are a very chaotic time. And I think they're supposed to be. And even people that have a ton accomplished in their 20s, they're still like, you're kind of coming out of this plasma goo of your teenage years and you're trying to find a form. And so the Saturn return comes along and it's like, this is what you've made of yourself so far. And these are boundaries. And this is also who you're becoming. And it's also a time to start to separate out from the stuff that you grew up with and to start to separate out from needing family in the ways that you might have in your 20s. It's like time to like cut the cord in those psychological ways, maybe even the financial ways, maybe even different ways, or in some way come into your own as an adult. That was a long answer.
Oh, I love that. What was your experience with your Saturn return?
Great question. I moved to LA from Toronto.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love Toronto.
I was just there. It was very great. Although it's really great here today. Yeah. I moved to LA and I really, for the first time in my life, I think, was able to start a brand new path for myself. I left all of the things that, all of the people, all of the relationships that I was really leaning on for a lot of support. And I came here on my own. I had never been to LA. I just moved here with like $1,200 and one person who needed a roommate. And she ended up leaving me her car and I had no job. And she let me not pay rent for, I think, 2 months. I should probably send her a check.
Yeah, what a girl.
Wow. She was an incredibly generous woman. And yeah, I eventually pieced a life together, but it was this really intense struggle and it was very lonely in a lot of ways. And that's Saturn is also can be isolating in a way, or like it forces us to face ourselves or deal with ourselves in a way that we might not have had to before. And I did that. But LA was also this like bright, sunny, shiny place that I was so happy to also be here, even though it was so hard.
What was the hardest part? Like when you first moved? Because I know, I hear from people that are kind of in, we have a lot of people in our community who are kind of about to move in that Saturn return.
Yeah.
Mine was a move as well to LA. So was there anything that just kind of like made you really like shift into your form or kind of challenge through that?
Yeah, everything. I mean, I didn't know anyone and to try to meet people in LA and I was living in the Valley and I was just really, I just had to find everything for myself. And this was before, there was MySpace back then.
Yeah.
Right. Like there wasn't like Twitter. You couldn't just like ask people like, what do I do? There was, if you didn't know people, you kind of had to like hunt for them. And so it really, I'm very big. Saturn's really huge in my chart. And so I'm very big on like trying to figure out the most intense obstacle to overcome and then seeing if I can do it. So I had many times before that entered into situations that I was like, this is going to test every single fiber of my being. And that's kind of what I get off on, I think. And so I was like, I'm going to figure out how to make it here. And it took years and a lot of effort. But it taught me so much about how to build my life as I wanted to. And I think if Saturn return can give us anything, it's that. It's like, this is your life. You are going to die. That's what Saturn tells us. Like, you are not going to be here forever. You have a very short amount of time here. Look how fast your 20s went by. Look how they flew by. And it's gonna go even faster in your 30s. And if that is true, and make that true in your everyday consciousness, what do you want to do with this one precious life? This is yours to define and shape if you have the privilege to do so. And if you do, that privilege is a great responsibility that I think we have to take seriously.
Completely agree.
For you, did you come to do astrology? Was astrology forever in your life, or what was that relationship and where did it come in?
I got my first reading when I was 12 years old and it blew me away. And I was like, oh my God, this woman is telling me things that I just felt like I knew what she was talking about, but I didn't have the language. And she had written a book and I got the book and was devouring it ever since. But I didn't want to be an astrologer. That was not a career path that I wanted. I came here for acting like everybody else. And then I ended up doing a whole bunch of stuff. I was a waitress and a bartender and I don't even know what, a million things. And I volunteered at a center in the Valley called We Spark, which is a cancer center. And I did Reiki there. And then I started teaching meditation. And then I did my yoga teacher training and did yoga there. And I also did it in San Quentin prison as part of like a restorative justice work there. I went back to school. I dropped out of a lot of grad school programs. And I was teaching yoga for a lot of the time that I was here in a lot of like regular old yoga spaces. And then all the other places that I could kind of get into and try to work with people. Because I wasn't fulfilled in a kind of mainstream yoga space. It was challenging for me to be in it. And it was at that time that I went back to school. And then I after dropping out of 3 grad school programs, I was like, you know what? What if I just put all this energy into astrology? Because it's really the only thing that ever worked. It was the thing that people wanted from me. But I was like, I don't want to be an astrologer. That's not like a real profession. And I wanted something that was going to, I wanted something that sounds so ridiculous now, but I wanted something that was going to bring me into the world. Like I didn't think, I felt like astrology was just going to relegate me even further into the outskirts of society.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in that kind of a domain. And I just really wanted to be part of some kind of social change and healing. And I wanted to be in a place where I could be my profession could intersect with other professions. And I just was like, astrology is going to just put me way out into the, nosebleed seats.
It's funny because like from my perception, it's like the opposite, because it's like astrology for me is able to plug into everywhere and everything and everyone, you know, because it's really the study of self. So it's like,
but it's really new,
of course,
that it's so in pop culture.
Yes.
Like it's not new. This isn't the first time it's happened, but it's the first time it's happened like this. Like, and none of our careers would have happened 10 years ago, right? Completely. There was no podcast. There was none. Like we didn't have access to each other the way we did. We had to go through the machine and the man and the system.
Yeah.
And so given that paradigm, which is what I started out in, I was like, I don't want to, I'm not going to write for Cosmo probably. And then how else am I going to speak to people?
Yeah. And now you are like a bridge, I think, like for people to have like that accessible information around astrology where they can really digest it. And it's at a, I don't know if higher level is the right wording for it, but if people are just reading in magazines, they're like, oh, okay, like Virgo this day.
Yeah.
But now to be able to dig deep and like Krista said, plug in and apply it everywhere you go in relationships and business, in your health, life, everything is like super empowering. And I feel like you are at the forefront of that. Like, did you ever, when did that shift where you became that bridge and were offering like these really comprehensive conversations, resources for people, and you felt like you were reaching people in a different way than the mainstream astrology?
Well, I started writing horoscopes. I love writing, and it is definitely a very important part of how I facilitate my energy and connect with people. And I've done readings for like 20 years for people or more. And I never was totally comfortable having that be the only part of how I made a living, because it's one-to-one work is so important, and it's so important to work. If you're into astrology, it's so important to find a professional astrologer that really knows their stuff, that's really steeped in the traditions that they're a part of and really knows what they're talking about. And I just kept, every reading I gave, I was like, I wish I could just tell people the basics of this, and then we could have a much deeper conversation. Or I wish people could own this information for themselves. And if they could, they would need a lot less from me. And that's where I always function from. I'm like, I don't want you to need me. I want you to need this system, because it's not me. I'm just like part of a huge, long, thousands of years of lineage of people who are like, oh, this means this and that means that. And if you can build a relationship with this thing, this planet, this part of your chart, this part of your life, I think you could really get to something that felt meaningful and deep and supportive and really fulfilling for you. And if that's true, like I think astrology is an incredibly complex system, but there are some very simple things that I think we could all, again, if the language speaks to you, pick up and utilize. And that's why I wrote the book. It really is an intro book. It's an intro astrology book into your chart. And I just want to be like, okay, let's just focus on these 3 keys. And if you can, and then you start adding everything on top of that, you're going to come up with an incredible mosaic that is a picture of your life as you are meant to live it out. And I promise you, if you develop a relationship with that, you will get somewhere that feels incredible, and things will start to open up for you that you couldn't even imagine. And I only know that because that's my experience. I came in with really nothing. Like I didn't come into life with a ton of support, or I have white privilege, I have ability privilege, I have cis privilege. I have those privileges and they're huge. And personally, I didn't come in with a ton of education. I didn't come in with a ton of familial connections. I didn't come in with much, but a lot of childhood trauma. And so working with my chart and working with the astrology has been one of the biggest pieces of my healing. and really accepting what my chart said and having my understanding of what my chart said and intersecting that with my greatest passions or the things that gave me energy and gave me life is what allowed me to give myself permission to write. And doing that changed my life. And my chart, the ruler of my ascendant, is in the 3rd house of writing and teaching and communicating and giving out messages. And once I saw that, once Demetra George took me through my chart in this way and really made that explicit and clear, I was like, okay, I'm in. What would happen if I was just in? And then I met my wife, and like everything literally within a couple of months just fell into place. And that was I was in my 30s. I had done a ton of work on myself. Like it wasn't just that moment, but it was everything. And then that moment was like the domino, and then everything kind of opened up.
If you're looking for your new favorite teas, Vadam Teas is where you'll find them. One, I just love this brand. They have a beautiful give back component. 1% of the revenue is directed towards the education of their tea workers' children in India. And every parent honestly wishes that their children have a better life. And Vadam Teas simply wishes to honor their aspirations. So love that component. But they also have just incredible teas that you can trust. They are taking out the middleman, making sure that we get the freshest teas possible. They have black teas, green, oolong, white, chai. Their turmeric products are absolutely incredible. Turmeric is something I drink every day. So I really love the turmeric moringa latte mix. And they have so many others that are just super delicious, creamy, and it's great for inflammation. If that's something that you're struggling with, it really helps with inflammation. All of their teas are organic. You could just add hot water or maybe your favorite nut milk, but I just love them so much. And so does Oprah. Oprah's Favorite Things 2019. So if you'd like a discount, of course, we have one, vadamteas.com, and you can use the code almost30 for 20% off. So that's VAHDAM teas.com. Use the code almost30 for 20% off. This brand has an unwavering commitment to clean ingredients, organic and regenerative farming, sex education, and responsible packaging. And they truly maintain the highest standards of purity and transparency for our health and the health of our planet. The brand is Foria, and they are so innovative in the health and sexual wellness space. They are using the power of plants and the wisdom of plants to create cannabis and hemp formulas that honestly have been changing lives since 2014. And I just have to shout out my favorite, the Awaken formula. This is a really beautiful lubricant that has really helped with inflammation. It's a great arousal oil, and I just can't say enough about it. This organic intimacy lubricant keeps things feeling amazing. And I just don't want you to feel shamed about like bringing in some lubrication to the bedroom. It just makes everything so much better. If you'd like to try Foria, they have other incredible products. You can check out ForiaWellness.com. That's FORA Wellness.com. And you can use our code almost30 for 20% off the site. So that's FORIA Wellness.com. ForiaWellness.com. Use our code almost30 for 20% off.
I want to just touch on one thing before we go into the book. And then I want to talk about your social justice work too, because a lot of girls in our community were asking about that, just you being so prominent in that space. But when you're going all through these things and you are, dropping out of grad school 3 times and you're feeling like
racking up a lot of debt.
Yeah, as you do. It's always just so fascinating. Like we look at you now, you have all these programs, you have a book, you're so established in the space, all these things, but you went from that place where you didn't know and you were lost and you were racking up debt. So how did you feel during that time? Did you feel hopeless? Did you feel lost? Like, how did you get yourself through it?
Yes, I felt incredibly frustrated and so angry. And like I write in the book, full of a lot of self-pity and self-doubt and self-hate and rejection and all of those things. And the thing I had going for me is that I had no choice but to just work. And no one was supporting me. I was single. I was like really broke and really in debt. And I was just like, I've always had to hustle. No one was going to make this happen for me. And I think that is my greatest blessing. I know folks, I see how hard actually it can be on people when they don't have to struggle. And I don't want unfair struggle for folks. And I think that there's a lot of struggle that is unnecessary, but there is also necessary struggle. It makes us stronger. It helps us to understand our capacity. And so I just had no choice but to keep going. I still felt sorry for myself. I still had a lot of self-loathing. I still had so much fear and so much resentment. And so I was so defended and defensive. And also, I never stopped going to therapy. And God bless my therapists and Reiki masters and everybody else, because they let me come for next to nothing. Like I had no money, and people let me come for $35, or people let me make them soup in exchange for things. And that also is something that shouldn't be. There should be equal access to healing. We should have healing justice. And also it took those people working and putting in a ton of labor into my life to make this happen. And so I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their generosity and their love and belief in me. Yeah. So it was a relentless desire to heal. And I just felt like I was like, I know that I always knew I had such incredible ambition. I just didn't know where to put it. And so it was, and by the grace.
I actually really relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like you just have this drive and you just feel like you're chomping at the bit, but you don't know where to go and what to do with it. And again, the industry, my career couldn't have existed when I felt like that. And so I write in the book, like sometimes you have to wait for the world to catch up and all these things to align. And my wife is also 12 years younger than me. So I was 38 when we met. I felt like, oh my God, I'm never going to meet somebody. This is never going to happen for me. Like I was single for so long and so lonely. And so all those things. And so I'd just be like, well, there's nothing else for me to do but go back to work and go back to the drawing board and go on another date. And I just didn't have another choice. So you just do it. And you try. I tried to be in gratitude. I tried to, be close to the people that love me and be good to them. And you just keep going into one action. You just do like, what is today? I was also in a lot of recovery programs and I just had a lot. I just kept seeking out where are people that have done something like this before, who knows what, and like inundating myself with recordings of speakers that I loved or, just like the messages that I needed. So because I had grown up in such an isolated situation and because I was, my story is one of severe neglect of my childhood, I always had to figure out how to get through, like how to make dinner or how to turn the heat on or, like things like that. So I was always like, okay, it's always up to me anyways. And that's not true. But I had that like, well, I've always been in this place where I've got to figure it out. So that's is a hindrance in some ways, but it's also what got me through those hard years.
I relate to that.
Yeah.
Does, when looking at your chart or anyone's chart, does trauma show up in a chart? Meaning
totally.
How, what does that look like? How can you kind of track that?
Yeah. You look at certain combinations. So Uranus is a planet of upheaval and chaos. It's a planet of rebellion and disturbing the status quo. But if it's close to, say, your moon or something like your sun or the ruler of your ascendant, something, or your ascendant itself, if it's making a hard aspect to it, then the turbulence is significant usually in somebody's life. And that can be something that we've inherited from our lineage. It can be something that we've experienced ourselves. And so it depends on how it manifests in the person's life. But I definitely look to that planet to see a break, that's something that's broken. And also Mars is Mars and Saturn are the problem planets. Pluto is a planet of like underworld experiences. So people that have literally experienced like abductions or being consumed by somebody's jealousy or rage or power and control over like abusive relationship dynamics. I would definitely be like, where's Pluto? What's going on? There's some asteroids that I also look towards, just depending on the person's story. And then like Mars and Saturn can really just do a ton of damage depending on if you have a day chart or a night chart. Like in a day chart, I have a day chart. Mars is the hardest planet in my chart. It's not actually the planet that does the most damage though. Saturn is really messed up in my chart and talks all about the isolation that I experienced, right?
Wow.
So Saturn is literally like walls and boundaries. And so because it's in such a hard aspect to my sun, I've always felt like quarantined or like put away. And I actually do spend a lot of time in studios and in spaces where I am actually quarantined and I need that. And so I've learned how to work it in a good way.
It's like home.
And also Saturn's a lot about discipline and structure and order. And the more I've been able to use that in a positive way, the better. So no matter what is in your chart, and I write about this like online a lot, but the most difficult parts of my chart have demanded that I develop everything that's made me successful. And I don't think we should ever underestimate that. Like you never want to see something difficult. Like if you have a child and you know astrology and you look at their chart, you'd be like, oh God. And I have that parents do like text me like, what does this mean? But also when you look at your chart, if you see something or if you read something in the book that freaks you out, just please know that those are the places that will generally demand that you work on something that you wouldn't normally work on.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of planets in their detriment and fall. So they're in situations that are really uncomfortable for them. And so they act out in ways, or it makes me feel like my life set up as like one where I'm like, oh my God, I don't have what I need. But because of that, I've had to develop all the things that I wanted to give myself. And then it's mine. You know, like no one gave this to me. A lot of people helped, and it's not just me and my wife and everybody that's, put their love and energy into me. It's all them. But I chose to, direct my life in a certain way. And it was up to me to make sure that I got to the places and the people that I needed. And you can see that in my chart.
And with that, so Reiki is a big part of my life too. I'm Reiki level 3 as of recently, and it's really made an impact. But I do want to talk about the astrology in relation to other healing modalities and how astrology can be a healing modality on its own, and then how it can connect with other parts of healing or other ways to heal.
Yeah. So my dad's third wife, her mom was a Reiki master. And I met her when I was 11 before a lot of this. And the moment I met her, I had like this voice inside that rose up. It was like, she knows how to get out and do whatever she says, follow her. And it was just like this huge, like, it felt like an initiation just being in the room with her. It was a very, very powerful healer. And I really begged her to let me take a Reiki workshop with her from the time I was 12. And she finally at 14 was like, okay, come. She was like, you're too young. You can't come in. So at 14, I started studying with her. And she's the kind of Reiki master that she doesn't like, she'd make everybody come and take workshops for a year before you could do your level 2. And then she didn't really initiate people into being a Reiki master that often. It was a very rare occurrence. So I came up through a very rigorous lineage in terms of Reiki, and she was initiated by Phyllis, who was Takata's granddaughter. And I understand now that there's a lot of chaos and the disruption around who's the lineage holder, but that was my lineage. So I always came up with that story. And so I studied under her. I did every Reiki workshop she'd let me do from the time I was 14 to the time I left at 29. She's in Toronto. And so through her, she was the one who got me that first astrology reading. And she was the one, all of her friends
Dad picked a good one. That third wife. She was the best. Are they still together?
They are.
Yes. All right. Yeah. Third time's a charm.
Yeah. So through her, I met astrologers and psychics and past life regressionists. And so I spent my teenage years just listening. I didn't want to go out and party. I just wanted to sit at the table and listen to them. And her husband was a tarot card reader. So on Friday night dinners, we would sit around and read everybody's cards. And so it was always together for me. That is to say that all of it was always interwoven. And not that they're not specific disciplines in and of themselves, but I never thought that one thing was the answer. Like astrology is not the answer to everything. It's a great tool for reflection, but then you have to go to therapy or go to Reiki or do your yoga, whatever your things are. That's all complementary. It all is a tool for self-reflection and self-knowledge. and for healing. And they all are different and they all kind of resonate with each other. And so if you're into symbolic languages, like my therapist is a Jungian therapist. And so, her specificity is dream work, but that's a symbolic language. And so we can talk astrology because it's part of the same canon. And so she can be like, oh, well, how does this relate to your astrology right now? And then I can be like, oh, well, this planet and that planet. And she'll be like, oh, okay. And then she can take the archetype in terms of her own system and talk about it with me in that way. So I don't think any one thing is the only thing that we need, but it's really great if we can find things that go together and can complement each other.
Love that.
When someone's looking at their chart, and I think we have our charts just in case, we do have them on our phones now, but when someone's looking at their chart, are there aspects of their chart that they might not think are important and I know you talk a little bit about this in the book as well. I was, as I was reading and mainly focusing on myself, but also people close to me, I was like, oh, wow. Like I've never really read into this aspect or things like that. Yeah. So I'd love for you to just kind of hit on some of those that people can read into more because they are so important. I think we just look at the sun, moon, and rising. But
it's really, astrology is really about how the sky looked when you were born and who is talking to who, like what planets are talking to which ones and what does that mean? And so again, this is an intro into all of those concepts and those planetary formations. But, it's really important to know like, oh, my sun is being trined by Jupiter. And that's a really huge boon and gift that I've got. And it's Jupiter. So it's bringing the qualities of confidence and optimism and abundance and wanting to go big and being, boisterous and what have you. But also like, where is Jupiter? Where is that blessing coming from? What house, what sign does it do well in it? And so there's a million factors to seeing the quality of connections between one planet and another in our chart. Like your sun is very rarely is it just hanging out without talking to anybody else. And so, okay, you're a sun in Virgo, but if it's being challenged or gifted by another planet, it's going to majorly color how and what that means for you. And also the house that it's in, like where are you supposed to shine? What space are you supposed to take up? What does that mean for you? How does that show up in your life? And do you allow yourself to do that? Is it a desire that you withhold from yourself or you give to yourself or all those different things?
Right. If someone says, just as a follow-up, like, if I'm a Virgo sun and like, if I were to say, which is true, like, I don't feel like a Virgo a lot of the time. However, when I am in like flow, I feel more of my Virgo. You know what I mean?
What does that mean?
I feel,
how does that show up?
I feel more organized, focused. I just kind of have this like grounded energy. My moon is in Gemini. So I'm just like, I'm curious when people don't really relate to that sun sign in particular, like what that means.
Yeah, I relate to that. I'm Pisces sun.
Well, a lot of times I think a lot of times people might not understand what the combination is about. There's that. But I always start with the rising sign. I actually wanted to start with the rising sign in the book, and you're never writing a book alone. You've got publishers and other people to deal with. But
loud and clear, baby, loud and clear.
But the rising sign is so important because it's the gateway into your chart. The rising sign is the most specific personal point in the chart because it's the literal moment you took your first breath. And it's the sign, the part of the sky that was rising up over the eastern horizon, which is the point in the sky where the sun rises and the stars rise. So it's the rising of life. It's the rising of energy. And when you as a being went and inhaled for the first time, that's when your spirit, your soul said, yes, I'm coming in. I'm in body now. I'm here. And that rising sign is the mark of that. And so whatever's there, if there's planets that were also rising there, that's all marking the yes of you personally. The sign that your sun was in, you share with everybody else that was born in that 30-some day span. But the rising sign, you only share with the people that were born at the moment, within the hour or two, at that same location in that same city as you. Otherwise, it's changing. Every couple hours it changes.
Right.
And the degree that it is at is really important. That's why I'm not big on cusps, because each degree is ruled by a planet in certain systems.
Oh, wow.
And each degree can mean something in other systems. And then any planets that were there in your first house that were in that sign, they're going to demand that you inhabit them and that the archetype of them be lived out through you. And so all those factors can be wildly different than an interpretation of the sign that the sun was in when you were born. Also, the sun is being aspected by other planets. So if you're a Virgo, sun, but your sun is being squared by Neptune, you're going to be very different than what the textbooks say about your Virgo sun. Okay. So it's really about the relationship between the planets and where they are. What that can mean for you. Virgos, there's an introverted energy to it. And so the way you shine is there's got to be a part of there being like an internal processing and an internal organizing. We focus a lot about Virgo being externally anal and organized, but it's really about how you take information in, how you process it, how you integrate it, and what you make from it. Because Virgo, at the end of the day, is like, how do I make this useful? How do I apply this? How can I use this as part of a medicine or part of some kind of, because in the end, Virgo wants to help heal. It's because things that are organized and streamlined get to work. And if things are working, things get worked out more easily. Yeah. And so it is about that flow in a sense.
That feels true. Does that feel true for you?
Yeah, definitely.
That feels true.
Yeah,
definitely.
I love when you hear one, you're like, yeah, that one's a good one. You're like, okay, yeah, I'll take that one. I want to talk about one of the questions from our community was about nodes. And they were curious about North Node versus South Node.
Yeah, very different.
Yes. Like what were the differences? When do we use each?
Well, they're always just existing. So nodes are points in space. They're not planets, but they
don't change.
They do.
For the person?
Oh, well, your chart is a snapshot. So that snapshot always stays the same, but nodes are always moving because they're about the intersection of the ecliptic and where an eclipse will happen. If the sun and moon and earth line up on that point, then we know that there's going to be an eclipse. South Node and North Node are very different. They're actually oppositional. And in how I've been taught and how I like to see them is, there's a lot of different myths the world over that when an eclipse happened, it was a dragon that encircled the earth that would eat the sun or moon. And that is the head of the dragon, and that's the North Node. And then the tail of the dragon is the South Node. And so the North Node is known for its desire and its hunger and its appetite. And there's an insatiable kind of chaotic nature to the North Node. And so you'll see a lot of like pop stars or celebrities with the North Node in a really prominent place because that hunger and desire and need might not be something that they consciously have, but it's something that needs to get lived out. And it is a need for material things in a lot of ways. And then the South Node is a place of releasing. It's almost like unplugging and something gets drained. And so it can feel like a draining of energy. It can feel like a loss. And also it is a point that is much more kind of like spiritual in nature because it's about the releasing and the letting go of material possessions or the releasing of things that get in the way of our own kind of spiritual growth. And so both are problematic and chaotic and also exciting and do their own thing. And in different astrologies, like in Jyotish and Indian astrology, they're looked at as like planets. They're looked at almost as like outer planets, and they're given a huge amount of emphasis. I tend to look at them in a chart when they're really close to something. So my wife has Venus conjunct the North Node, and she has this huge appetite for love and relationship. And it's not something that you might know about her when you just meet her up front because she's very business and she's very intense and she's very, very powerful. But she has this, she's always had this huge desire for relationship and love and, waited for the right one, but was, with me, she's incredibly loving and our relationship is very much the center of both of our lives. But you can see that we joke about how hungry her Venus is. How insatiable, like she couldn't.
You're in the booth all day and she's like, my Venus is hungry, babe.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think
I benefit greatly from it.
Oh, I was going to say it's perfect for her.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think a lot of people do turn to astrology, at least, in our community when they are, if they're single and looking for love, a partner in relationship. Are there aspects of the chart and like just if you're looking at it kind of like when you pinpoint a Saturn return, but can you tell like in a chart, like when
you're going to find
when
somebody?
Love could come in or how it would come in?
There are definitely astrologers that specialize in that kind of thing. And I will say that it works a lot of the times and then doesn't in other ways. So astrology is definitely a system of prediction. I don't tend to focus on that appendage of it. But what I can say and that's interesting in the chart is that you can tell the kind of qualities that you're going to need from a partner by looking at certain parts of your chart and the planets that rule that part. So if you want to look at committed partnerships, then you look at the 7th house, any planets that are in it and the ruler of that house and where it is. So the ruler of my 7th house is in my 1st house, which means that my partner's 1st house is self, 7th house is partners. My partners need to work with me. And my wife is my business partner.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, she edited this book.
Wow.
She doesn't have formal credit. I wanted to give it to her, but again.
So she's the one that put sun first.
No.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You're like, we're still fighting it.
Yeah, honestly, we're pissed.
Yeah. She's the one that gave me the format and structure actually for the book. And she edited every single word with me. It was a traumatic bonding experience. It was a lot. But she's the one who's helped me to construct every aspect of the business and the way in which I teach everything. She taught me how to teach. And so without that, I wouldn't be where I am. So my relationship setup is literally like that person, Demetra George, my teacher's, like when she first looked at it, she giggled because she was like, well, you need somebody to serve you. And my wife is an incredible activist and she has her own nonprofit. It's a national nonprofit and that works with folks that are survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, doing financial justice work and being at the nexus of those two things. And she also helps me. Wow. She works with me. She's, the creator, my business, co-creator, and does all of this with me. And this success wouldn't be without her. 1,000,000,000%.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Could you reiterate again that point that you made with the houses and why she fits?
Oh, why she does? Because the planet that rules my 7th house.
Yeah.
So the planet that's in charge of it is in my 1st house of self. So my partners need to work with me. It's a little bit of a selfish setup. I need them to facilitate the me of my life, my talent, my work. Like I have to have that. And it was funny because before her, I always wanted that from my partners, but they didn't give it to me in the way that I wanted. And I remember the moment I realized that she had that thing. We were it was probably 2 a.m. We had just moved in together and we were working on something for the business together. And I just looked over at her and I had this overwhelming sensation. I was like, wow, she's willing to work as hard as I am. And she's as dedicated to this thing as I am. And I was just like, oh my God, this is going to be wild.
Wow.
And we work as hard as we need to on every single thing we do. And it's a rare, I think, quality in a person that is as committed to the quality of work that is going to be put out as you are and cares that much about doing that with you. And it's like a dream come true for me. Because I just didn't have those resources. I'm not a natural, at a lot of the things that she is. And so I always think, finding the partnerships that are a good fit for you. They don't have to be romantic, of course, but any kind of collaboration where that person has the things that you don't is magic. You get to potentiate each other. The relationship becomes more than the sum of its two parts. It's, it's like I'm so much more with her than I could have done on my own. It's just impossible for me to hold all those things.
Hey fam, I wanted to share that I got my Paragon Vitamins personal nutritional assessment test back. This is where I sent in my hair sample. It was so easy, and like literally within 2 weeks, I have a comprehensive assessment in front of me where they help me combine personal supplements with dietary and lifestyle recommendations to really help me balance my body and improve how I'm feeling and performing every day. And I have to say that before I did this test, for probably the last year, I've been experiencing low energy. I've also been experiencing poor circulation in my hands and feet. So this can be attributed to what they're saying in this assessment is a kind of a slow metabolic rate. And so there's a few contributing factors like the ratio of phosphorus to calcium. So when there's not enough phosphorus in ratio with calcium, which is basically the right balance is needed to fuel cells, then you will experience low energy. My test results also showed that I had a low level of dietary sodium and potassium, which is reducing my adrenal and thyroid function, respectively. So there's just so much here, and I feel so much better that I have some answers. And their supplements, I got my 4 weeks of supplement support, and y'all, you have packets for the AM, midday, and PM, and it's all in your respective packets for you already. It's labeled, you know what you're getting, and then you can always refer to your report. And by the way, the packaging you can recycle, which I love. I'm blown away and I'm feeling so good. If you have any questions, let me know, at me on Instagram, at Lindsay Simsick, or join our secret Facebook group. But I'm just feeling really, really good. If you were looking for answers, if you were looking for a comprehensive assessment, a really reliable test, Paragon Vitamins. You can visit paragonvitamins.com and use the code almost30 for 30% off Paragon Vitamins nutritional assessment, which is only $90, and 4 weeks of free vitamins. So paragonvitamins.com, use the code almost30 for 30% off the nutritional assessment and 4 weeks of free vitamins. Okay, maybe this is you. You've done it. You've made your creative passion your full-time job, but maybe you wish someone would have told you how much time drafting proposals and creating contracts and chasing down payments would actually take. It's kind of crazy. The good news is that HoneyBook can help you with all of those tedious admin tasks so you can get back to doing what you love and doing what you are good at. And HoneyBook has completely elevated and changed our business. I am so fucking grateful. HoneyBook is an online business management tool that organizes your client communications, bookings, contracts, and invoices all in one place. It's perfect for freelancers, entrepreneurs, or small business owners that want to consolidate services they already use, like QuickBooks, Google Suite, Excel, and MailChimp. And with HoneyBook, you can automate your busy work. They have easy-to-use templates for emails, proposals, brochures, and invoices. And they also have e-signatures and built-in automation to save you time and get you paid faster. That is important. So if you want to simplify your to-do list and stay in control, choose HoneyBook. And right now, HoneyBook is offering our listeners 50% off, 50, when you visit tryhoneybook.com/almost30. Payment is flexible, and this promotion applies whether you pay monthly or annually. You can go to tryhoneybook.com/almost30 for 50% off your first year. Tryhoneybook.com/almost30.
How has love changed you?
In every conceivable way. She teaches me how to be I'm a better friend, a better family member, a better business owner, a better writer, a better human. She has this ability. She's so thoughtful, like she is so hardworking, and she's so intelligent, and she's so strategic, and she's so incredibly thoughtful. She's always going underneath the surface of what's happening and trying to read human behavior and really trying to understand the needs of everybody involved. And so she's always able to stop and be reflective. And I think that is such an incredible gift. And I think it's what most of us don't know how to do because we're in fear so much, and we're in panic, and we're in survival mode. And so we talk a lot about what does it mean to be out of survival mode, and what does it mean to live in abundance? And I think that there is no abundance if we have to stay in survival mode all the time. There's scarcity in survival mode. And it's obviously something that's outside of our control until we get to the space and the time and the healing modalities. And again, all that has to do with privilege and access. And getting out, reminding ourselves that we're not in crisis at the moments that we're not in crisis, and that we have the privilege to stop and think and breathe and be, is like this incredible access point into all of the abundance that you need and want in your life, and how to also share that. And so she teaches me how to do that endlessly, because I'll just be go, 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 and in flight or fight mode if I'm left to my own devices. So she reminds me to chill and slow down and be more thoughtful.
How do you remedy, talking a lot about, and this is something like a personal question that I think about a lot, with the healing modalities that you have access to and that you've been granted access to, and moving out of a scarcity mindset to abundance mindset and remedying the privilege that you've had. Asking for personal, I struggle with this and think about this a lot, is how do I move into abundance mindset myself? How do I stand firm in the belief of the people that have helped me heal previously, but also not feel ashamed be aware and acknowledge, but not feel ashamed of privilege that I've been provided?
I think it requires great thoughtfulness. And I think that privilege can be deconstructed and counteracted by really wanting to listen to other folks and to learn and to be available, to be available to our shame around the privilege, to be available to humility while learning how to deconstruct it and maybe even use it for something that's not damaging. And I think that it's really important to pay attention and to try to think about what I might be missing in this situation. Like what is my privilege obstructing in this moment? Like, how am I not being able to bear witness to the full humanity of something? Where am I objectifying people or situations? And how have I been taught to do that? And how does this false power that I have rely on my ability to continue doing that? And so I think if I'm in that place of questioning, then that is a way of being like, oh, that's also, okay, there's my shame about getting that person's pronouns wrong, or about, making an assumption about something. Okay, that's shame. And it can be useful to me in the moment, in terms of being like, oh, I did something that I would like to do it better. And then using that shame to course correct and then moving on from it. Because shame compounded is no good. And it's only useful if it helps me to adjust my behavior and change my behavior. And that, as we know, is the real apology to anybody. We can say, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. And also, if we do it again, it doesn't matter. So it's like, how do I help? How does my shame help me to shift my behavior, and to also help me to open up to a greater understanding of the human condition and human experience? And if I can use that in that way, then it can really, it can be beneficial. But if I wallow in my shame, then I'm actually just being more self-centered and taking up more space and being more annoying than I was before.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, like being here in LA, and, we kind of navigated as well, where these modes of healing, of learning more about ourselves, are kind of put on a pedestal, whether under an umbrella of like this type of wellness that costs this much, and this is who can access it. I'm wondering how you navigate it and use discernment to say yes to opportunities, to say no, and really kind of create that new paradigm, hopefully, that we're shifting into. I don't know if we're shifting, but it kind of feels like these small choices can make the shift.
Yeah. I've said no to a lot of things. I don't show up to a lot of places that have invited me if I don't feel like the paradigm that they're coming from is actually about systems change. So I'm interested in healing, but I'm really interested in systems change. And if someone's asking me to do something and it's not kind of a part of that, then I'm not really that interested. There's a reason why we're so wounded. There's a reason why there's so much chaos and pain in the world. And it's in large part because of the systems that we live in. And so I'm interested in talking about that. And wherever I can go and have a conversation with somebody who is in that line of work and who's already doing that, that's what I'm interested in. And that's where I'll put my energy. And I just don't really worry about the rest.
Like when you say no to someone where the systems aren't changing, or it's just kind of
where
murky,
it's upholding. Like if there's a lot of healing, there's a lot of the healing industrial complex that totally upholds white supremacy and upholds homophobia or cisnormative, heteronormative kind of landscape, a thin, privileged, kind of weird, wonky way of being engaged with what they call health. If there aren't Black and brown and queer and trans folks at the center of the organizing of a space, then there's a problem.
Right.
Especially if we're talking about healing and especially if we're talking about wellness, because white supremacy and colonization and heteronormativity and the rest and ableism and all of it is the most damaging, toxic, harmful things that we have to live within. And it is our duty, especially if we have privilege, to talk about that and to be like, how do we actually deconstruct it? Like, what does that mean? So, again, in our house, we talk about it all the time. Like it's my wife's work besides the business is to disrupt gender-based violence and especially how it impacts people financially. We don't talk about that, right? So if we're going to talk about wealth equality, we also have to talk about how domestic, intimate partner violence, sexual violence factors into how somebody can make money and actually keep themselves safe. And that is a systemic thing. It's a communal thing. It's domestic violence, intimate partner violence is not a private issue. It's an issue that is upheld by the systems and the structures that we live within and the agreements that we have with each other, both unconscious and conscious.
Have you been able to invite those opportunities into conversation? I guess what I'm asking is is it just a no, thank you? Or is it this is how I'm feeling. This is the why behind the no? Or is it not even, because, there are some no's that we've made where we know our why.
Yeah.
And would it be worth it to enter into conversation where it's like, hey, this is why we said no. We'd love to talk about this. Maybe there's an opportunity for change in the future.
Yeah, I've said that, but I stopped the conversation there because I don't have time to then walk you through the thing. Yes. But this, you could know that this is why I'm saying no.
Yes.
And then you can go do the work around it if you want.
Absolutely.
And then sometimes you're just like, well, that's just a whole industry that's not interested in change. So I'm good. I'm just going to keep it moving and be useful where it can be useful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for asking.
My last question, I want to talk about 2020 astrology.
Yeah.
What is in the forecast? What should we be looking out for? What should we be prepared for? Elections coming up. What's happening?
It's a hard year to be an astrologer in that way. That question is a hard one. And I think that
you got bad news for us.
We're how many days into 2020 and what's already happened?
Yeah.
Right before the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which is about power, control, people that want to induce fear into the water streams of our consciousness and
reptilians.
Life. Reptilians, we're trying to start war. And wherever we're at this very hour with that, I don't know because it changes all the time. But it's a very draconian kind of setup. And it definitely talks about the ways in which systems are crumbling, failing, don't work, the big transformation that needs to happen. Of course, death of patriarchy is how a lot of us hope that will kind of roll out. And also, what does that mean? And does that bring us all down with our systems are obviously not sustainable. The way in which the world works is not sustainable. And we need actual, literal structural change. And that's Saturn, Pluto, all of that. And then also, it fell very close to the Queen's or on the Queen's ascendant, the Queen of Queen Elizabeth. And, her grandson was like, I'm not into the structure.
Yeah.
And I'd rather choose my wife. And actually this is about white supremacy and racism. And my wife is not, and therefore this is my family. And I'm done. And so like the system of the monarchy that had a huge kind of blow to the way it functions. And so that happened all around that time. Was also eclipse time. So all of that stuff was coming up. Security, the talk of national security was a Cancer eclipse. It was very much about that, make people feel nationalistic and afraid for their safety. And you can manipulate them in any way, shape, or form you need to. So all that stuff is happening. Then at the end of the year, we have Saturn is going to be changing signs. Jupiter's going to change signs, and they're going to meet up. And it's called the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, also known as the Great Conjunction. For thousands of years, astrologers have looked to that conjunction as the beginning and is the ending and beginning of new cycles. It happens every 20 years, but every 200 years, it happens in a new element. So it's been happening for 200 years in an earth signs. And this is the first time it's going to happen in an air sign. And so it's the end of a 200-year cycle and the beginning of a new one. So before we get there is a Venus retrograde. Okay. But then in September, there's a Mars retrograde. And Mars retrogrades tend to bring up our anger and division and that kind of hostility that Mars.
It's interesting timing.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Also, in November, October, November, there's a Mercury retrograde. So Mercury is going to be stationing direct on November 4th.
Whoa.
And Mars will still be retrograde.
Isn't it?
Election day.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Wow.
So when Gore lost to Bush, Mercury was stationing retrograde on that election day. This Mercury is going to be stationing direct. So no one knows how it's actually going to unroll. But during 2016, there was a Mars retrograde. And I don't know if you remember there being a lot of anger and unreasonable acts of violence and all kinds of mayhem, but I do. And it was in alignment with that. There was more than that happening, but that was one of the main things happening. And so I expect there to be quite a lot of that kicking about. So what I think is very important for us is to get a hold of and understand the impact of our anger and our rage, where it is, if it's justified, it's justified. And also, how are we a part of putting that out into the world? How do we take responsibility for that power that we have? Where are we directing it? What are we doing with it? Because the end of the year is so defining in terms of like big cycles for the earth, everything we do leading up to it is very important. Who we choose as leaders, how we get through all of that's huge. And it's defining. And so how we end one cycle and begin another is very important. It's kind of like when you leave a relationship. How you leave is really important. It's as important as how you were in the relationship. A friendship, leaving a city, leaving a romantic relationship. And if it's painful and hard, and if the relationship was abusive or something awful, then how you leave it has to be about having dignity for yourself, right? It's not that you owe anybody else anything, but it's like, how do I have dignity and integrity in this situation? I owe that to myself. And so we can think of this year as also that. But it's a year that's incredibly defining and incredibly important in terms of our human evolution. But you don't need an astrologer to tell you that. You can feel that.
Yeah.
Australia is on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who runs this country is not to be trusted with anything, let alone nuclear codes, and is just chomping at the bit for a war because it's an election year. And the setup astrologically says that. And so it's like, well, this is what the astrology is saying. We're living in it. This is it. You could just turn on the news and see the astrology. It's so verbatim. Like when that happened, all the astrologers at the beginning of the year were like, oh my God, like we didn't want it. You know what I mean? Like we could see it and we're like, okay, maybe it's not as severe as it looks. And then that happened and everyone was like, okay, So here we are.
Yeah.
And so here we are. This is it. It's not something unknown to you or me. It's like, it's written everywhere and it's on every broadcast. And this is the astrology. It's like, what do we do? How can we stay as much as possible out of those moments of like feeling we're in crisis, but we're not, so that we can be present and conscious and fully available to the moment? Because that's the only place that our power is. My only power is right here. I don't know what the future, I don't know. None of us do, but we can only be here and as like open to the moment as possible.
Taking that in. Yeah, it's really powerful. I don't watch the news as much as maybe I should, but also, boundaries. But I do find when I let it in, it is like you latch on to those chaotic things and stories and events, and it kind of then starts to circulate in your own life too.
Yeah.
So I love that idea of being in that present moment so that, the fear of the future doesn't take over.
Yeah. It's not going to do us any good.
Yeah. What are you personally working on this year? If there's an intention for your year, a lot of like what we talk about on the podcast is just hopefully making people feel less alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the book is how I'm starting the year.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's so good.
Last night, we just found out that it was a New York Times bestseller.
Oh, no way. So you're like, I have to go to Almost 30 to celebrate.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
We're celebrating today.
Wow.
Dang, that is awesome. Congrats.
Yeah. And again, it was, you don't do this alone. And there were definitely some obstacles to making sure there was enough books in circulation and such.
A good thing.
Don't let anybody underestimate you. People will underestimate what you're capable of. Make sure you do everything you can for your art and your work and fight for it. That book has made me fight for so much that I didn't know how to fight for before. And it has stretched me in every single way. And we've been underestimated many times in the process of it. And it is a very frustrating process and also incredibly satisfying to know that we are, and I again encourage all of you listening to be loud and to be obnoxious and to pester people and to be adamant about the things that you know to be true about your work. Do not let anybody else's laziness or apathy or distraction deter you from being the advocate that your work needs you to be, because that is a manifestation of your hard work and labor. And whatever you put yourself into, you are allowed to fight for it. Don't let any system or institution tell you that you are being too much and that you should settle for anything, because it's not true. And it's up to you to make sure that doesn't get the best of your hard work. So the book, and also, learning how to be that next, the book is, I feel like it's rebirthing me and what it means. And we've got a lot of other really exciting projects that are also about to come out. And I was like, yeah, the book, I'll put it out. And then I got to get to all this other work and all these other projects that I'm like so excited to put out into the world. And now the book's come and I'm like, oh God, I actually have to pay more attention to the book too. Like it's got its own life and it's doing its thing. And so it's all of that. And I hope that it helps people feel less alone. I hope that it helps validate you, because I think that if you can radically accept yourself, you can more quickly move into the world in a way with confidence and determination to do the thing that you're here to do, because we need you. Like we desperately need you, and we need all of us in. And that's what 2020 is about. Like it's a year to be all in. And whatever that means for you, I promise that will push you to do things that you didn't think you could. And in the process, it will open up so much for you.
The book is You Were Born for This, Astrology for Radical Self-Acceptance. And I have it by my bed.
Yeah.
And it is amazing. The branding is so...
Thank you.
So you.
Hot fucking
You know what I
Thank
mean?
you.
Like,
Thank you.
I got it and I was like,
be so proud.
that's about right. It is.
Do you have
It's
the
like-
hard copy?
I know I have this exact one.
Okay. Because the hard copy is so pretty.
Is it sick?
I should have brought you one. I'm so sorry.
Okay. We'll go buy. We got it.
Yeah.
Okay. excited to get it. But thank you for making the time. We know you're busy, but this was like a grounding conversation at the beginning of the year that I think a lot of people will really appreciate.
Thank you.
Where can people find you?
People can find me at ChaniNicholas.com and on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook at the same handle.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
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 Thanks so much, Chani. We loved having you on the show. And if you'd like to get Chani's new book, You Were Born for This, Astrology for Radical Self-Acceptance, it is available everywhere books are sold. Go to ChaniNicholas.com to learn more about Chani and all that she offers.
Yeah. And if you're interested to do the retreat, almost30podcast.com/retreat. It is going to be magic. And then the Jenna Zoe event is available on our website, almost30podcast.com. That is digital. So it is available for anyone all over the world. We have tons of digital downloads with that. You can ask her questions and it'll be really helpful for you understanding your human design.
All right. Review of the week. Whoop, whoop. Truly life-changing. 5 stars. Julie.
5 stars.
Julie.
5 stars from Julie.
Julie from the US. I waited for too long to write a review, but here I am finally doing it. I've listened to the podcast for almost 3 years now.
Whoa.
And to say it has been life-changing is an understatement. It has completely changed my worldview and helped me to reveal and love my true self. It has helped me to shed layers so that I can fully embrace who I am. I'm a better friend and a more conscious human because of everything I've learned from you, as well as from all of the amazing men and women you've had on the podcast. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you do to bring this community to us. I'm so incredibly grateful. Thank you,
Julie. So much. Thank you guys for writing sweet reviews. It just means a lot, just to take a second and just really say something nice. So thank you so much for being a part of our community. You can follow Almost 30 Podcast at Almost 30 Podcast on Instagram, on Twitter. There's a secret Facebook group where there are 15,000 plus women connecting every single day. It's the most supportive place on the internet. And then we also have an ambassador program. And the ambassador program really helps for people to create community where they are. So if you feel like you're alone, you're different, that you're the only one in your hometown or city that is going through something, or that feels different, or that feels like they want to express something different in the world, the ambassador program is for you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you on the next one.
See you soon. Bye.
Yeah.